Hey, it's Jamie from jamieedwards.com, and today I want to talk to you about how peer pressure can affect planning poker on agile software projects. I'm going to talk today about what planning poker is, some common arguments that people use for it and against it, right after this. Hi, I'm Jamie Edwards, and at Healthy Software Developer, I want to help you have a sustainable career so you don't get burned out. You don't get pushed around by people that don't really understand how to develop software, and you can just get back to having a great career again. So what is planning poker? It's really an approach that agile teams, whether you're using Scrum, Kanban, or any of the other processes for developing software, that people came up with to try to improve the accuracy of estimates. And the thought behind it was, instead of having you as a UX person or operations person or software developer estimate how long it might take to do some work yourself, that everybody gets together in a meeting room or possibly on Slack or using some kind of tool, and everybody puts essentially a vote in of how many points or hours it's going to take to get something done. Now, teams have many different ways of measuring effort, and that's not the purpose of this video. But the whole reason that this was come up with is really because of three primary arguments that I hear time and time again for why teams should do planning poker. So the first reason is to just have a better understanding of the work. When you, as an engineer or a design person or any discipline related to developing software, are asked to do some estimation, it sometimes is looked at like having one set of eyes on the problem of estimation isn't good enough. And so the thought is bringing everyone together and letting multiple people basically throw a number into the ring or vote on how long they think something will take or how much effort's involved, that's going to cause people to come up with undiscovered work. In other words, things that maybe one person thought that was involved with doing the task and other people thought of that first person didn't. And so if you hear a team talking about bringing the whole team or having multiple eyes on it by doing planning poker, this is typically the reason that people use to say it's a good practice. The second reason that teams like to try to use planning poker and management likes to sell that it's a good approach and it will come up with better estimates is camaraderie. And this can be true. And the thought behind this is just that bringing people together, especially if they're just coding for long sessions or they're doing a lot of work separately, it gives an opportunity for people to get together, have a little bit of fun, maybe understand problems better, and just honestly a reason to socialize. And the third reason that people will often say planning poker is a good idea is to reduce the chance that somebody pads their estimates. So people in management and leaders and founders of companies are often very concerned that the software developers or UX people or any kind of engineer might be slacking off or not doing as hard of work as they're paying them for. And this really gets back to a mindset of just people being stuck in fear and worrying about others and not trusting their employees enough. And this is a huge problem in our industry. But oftentimes, I think planning pressure can just be used as a way to give managers a feeling that this will make sure that somebody doesn't say something that's going to take, let's say, 3 points. They just say that it's going to take 9 because they want to sit around and take way longer to do it. And in my experience, this never happens. Sure, there's people out there who slack off, but it's very few and far between. And I'd rather just talk to you about some of the warnings and reasons I actually think that sometimes planning poker is not a good idea. So what are the arguments against planning poker? Why would one team maybe think it's not such a good idea to do it? Well, first is what I call competence bias. You've probably heard me talk about in many of my other videos on this channel about how when you have a team of software developers and they're doing work together, or you have a team of UX researchers and they're all doing design and understanding things about the problem and the service design, everybody works differently. This isn't a career where you're flipping burgers and everybody just follows a really standard process and you can get it to be super repeatable and predictable. Software development, it's knowledge work. I've talked about this many times. And when you do planning poker, one of the issues is sometimes one software developer may be much more familiar with, let's say, the framework or maybe even the business problem than someone else is. And so when they sort of throw their number into the ring as part of planning poker and say, this is how much effort I think is involved in this, they're often heavily biased depending on how competent they are with the work that's being scoped. And that can create a real problem where there's pressure that is just unrealistic for the team to meet, and it actually puts the project in danger. And that brings me to the second argument I like to give against planning poker. And the purpose of this video is not to tell you don't do planning poker. It's really just to evaluate, for some teams it makes sense, in some it doesn't. Well, the second reason why I think teams should be wary of planning poker is when people shame each other into conformity. Depending on the maturity of the people on your software development team or doing operations or whatever's being estimated with planning poker, some people are really humble and they're able to work with others and inspire them, but understand the differences between people. And they're okay with the fact that one developer might think something's going to take twice as long as another because they're the one doing the work and they're trying to be realistic about the effort. I've been on other teams sometimes, though, where there's an architect or just a senior developer of some sort who's been on the project a really long time, and they start to bust the balls of other people. They're just basically like, you really think it's going to take that long? Come on, it's not going to take that long. Or they might say, there's no way it's going to take that long. Actually, I think, you're overcomplicating the problem. I can show you why your estimate's wrong. Well, while I think it's good for everybody on the team to try to help each other understand the scope of work better, shaming people into agreeing to an estimate that is not right for them is a real problem with planning poker, and it eliminates the safety that needs to be in place for people to learn to estimate better if they're forced to estimate what somebody else thinks they should. And it's really just something I think you need to look out for if you're deciding, should we do planning poker? Look at your team and the personalities of the people on it and try to determine, do I have people that are understanding enough and accepting enough of each other's differences that kind of shaming isn't going to go on? The third reason why planning poker may not be the right fit for your team, depending on the culture, is it really avoids the opportunity for people to learn to estimate better. The reason for this is, oftentimes, if you get a group of people into a room or on Slack and they're deciding how to estimate something and they're doing planning poker, the whole idea I talked about in the arguments for the beginning of the video, the whole idea is that by getting people together, they're going to make better decisions and have more accurate estimates. And people can fall into, and I've seen this, somebody who's maybe not very comfortable with estimating, they might essentially just throw in a really random number and not even care and not even really think it through before coming up with their number, and then they just defer everything to more senior people. And while I think it's good to harness people that might be a little more experienced with estimating, I talked about this in my The Secret of Scrum video. A big part of doing Scrum or Kanban or any kind of iterative software development where you get features out quicker is to learn where we need to improve. And one of the areas everybody needs to improve, myself included, is estimating. And so if you use planning poker and people don't feel safe and comfortable with estimating their own work, that they're kind of pressured to adhere to what other people think, they're really missing out on an opportunity to put an honest estimate in and fail to meet that estimate. And if you're in management out there, you might think, I don't ever want somebody to fail, but this is the way that people learn. And sometimes the best way that I ever learned in my career was I did something and I did it wrong. And I then, because of doing it wrong and my own pressure on myself for, man, I never want to do that again, I really focused on doing better. And so if planning poker kind of creates this safety net where people who aren't good at estimating defer that to too many other people, it's really avoiding the chance for them to learn themselves. And the fourth reason why I think planning poker could be not right for your team, or just your team needs to be really careful about it, is If you're on a team where there's a lot of pressure to get work done and getting work done is all about looking right on a chart, and that the burn down chart is showing that the team's developing software as quickly as possible, and you're in a culture at a company that unfortunately isn't truly agile, there's so much pressure to hit deadlines that if you use planning poker and you've got a manager in the room, they shouldn't really be having any say if they're not actually an engineer or somebody doing the work in the estimate. But I find in many companies this doesn't happen, that there's people that influence the estimates that have no reason doing so. And what that usually results in then is, let's say you're going to do an estimate and you say it's going to take 3 points, and everybody else on your team has been there a really long time, and they kind of make you feel stupid. They're shaming you like I talked about before, and they convince you that it should be a 1. Well, if you then go to do that work and you're getting to the end of your deadline, or you're getting to the end of the sprint, if you're doing Scrum or something like that, and you realize, shoot, I'm not going to get it done in time, there's immense pressure to then shortcut quality and to make compromises in the code and hide the state of your work and make it look like you got things done. And so the only way I think that you can get yourself out of that situation is if you choose to use planning poker. I think those Scrum teams, if they're doing Scrum or if you're doing Kanban and there's any kind of estimate given out to the work, they have to be safe environments where people can be wrong with their estimate and they still can take as long as it takes to do the job right. So does your team understand planning poker? Do you think they're right for it? Do they respect each other enough to actually use it without shaming each other? Does the business support the fact that no matter what kind of estimates are given out, it's very likely they're going to be wrong? At least that's been my experience and probably yours too in many years of developing software. Leave me some comments below. If you're new to my YouTube channel, please subscribe and click the bell icon. You'll actually be notified when I have new videos available. And if you'd rather listen to this as a podcast, you can subscribe and follow me there on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. So until next time, thanks.